Hello, everybody, and this is my top tier list slash review of the Five Nights at Freddy's Fazbear Fright series of books I've been interested in talking about for a while now, since I'm in the process of reading them. I'm in book 5 right now. I'm going to try and do the first book, maybe the second book for this video if I have time, but I highly doubt it because I tend to ramble. Just to bring up, I am not like your average reviewer. Now that makes me sound pompous. What I mean is, I'm not really a reviewer. I'm I'm actually not really good at this. I'm just speaking what I think. Just think of me as the equivalent of a Amazon comment. Just a really long one. Now, for people that are not familiar with the series, basically each book contains 3 stories and a epilogue chapter that connects to all the books together if you've read them all. So I won't go in too deep on the epilogue chapters. I feel like that's going to be like a completely separate video altogether because it's just like it's not a long story if you put all the chapters together, but I do feel like it's a big connection story compared to the other ones. Now, without any hesitation, let's start with the first book, Into the Pit. Now, of course, with all these books, the title of the book is usually the title of the first story. Now, for the first half of this video, I'm going to try my best to keep it spoiler free, but after I kind of put everything like on the tier list, I'll have a end section of where I kind of go into more detail on spoiler territory. So the story starts off with this character named Oswald, and he's kind of going through a frustration of his family not having a really good financial status at the moment. A bit of a shift. I mean, his family wasn't rich at first, but they have been struggling money-wise for a long enough time to be frustrated with the situation. Because like the town itself is also uh, struggling with its economy as a whole. So, but his family's kind of hitting the worst of it right now. I really like Oswald's character in the story only because of the fact that it does a really good job of making him a little bratty, but without making it like frustrating. Like you could feel the frustration of his situation, especially if you experienced something similar to it. Whether it be for a long period of time or even a short period of time of just struggling with decisions on like what would be best for the family financially. Especially when you have the whole thing about his friend moving away. In fact, a lot of people that used to live in the town moved away to get better jobs and stuff, and there's a slight possibility that his own dad might have gotten a better job if they moved, but they stayed for family reasons. So it's a very relatable family issue. I was just impressed of how they wrote Oswald in this. They could have easily made him like a super brat, and some people might still think he's a brat, but I think it fit with him trying to adjust to the situation, but also being frustrated. Especially since a lot of his frustration he kind of kept to himself until he blows up at certain points of the story, which is, like I said, I personally find them understandable. That's why I personally like Oswald as the character. But you're gonna hear this a lot from me when it comes to reviewing these stories because I'm far more invested in the human characters in these stories than I am really with the either monsters slash animatronics. Not that I can't get invested, but it's one of those things where, like, if you can't get me invested in the character, I'm most likely not going to get invested with the monster involved with the story. And let me get into, like, the weirdest part of the story is the whole ball pit situation, where technically, uh, so, like, the whole ball pit thing is that he goes into the. Why did he go into the ball pit again? I can't remember. Why did he go into the ball pit again? Why on earth did he go into the ball pit the first time? Hold up, let me recollect myself. No, wait, hold up. Okay, now I remember. Because for some reason, okay, I remembered I thought it was the second time he went to the ball pit. That was the reason. No, the first time he went into the ball pit is because that was the moment where he kind of blew up for the first time, where he was frustrated about the situation of the family, financial stuff, and so he's kind of got frustrated with his dad, so he decides to hide in the ball pit that's been not been used in a very long time, so it's very gross, dusty, and who knows what else is in there. But he decides to hide in there because it's the only place he could think of to hide, so his dad would have to, because he wanted to give his dad a reason to come in there and get him, basically. Like I said, there's a point in the story where he gets really frustrated with his dad. Um, but then it gets weird because when he tries to pop his head out, that's when he's kind of tr- like transported. Is that the word I'm looking for? Transported. He was transported into like what the restaurant like that he's at. Like this restaurant is really old that he's in, and it it looks like the restaurant like years ago when people used to come into it, which obviously you find out it's a Freddy Fazbear place. So obviously you get the connection with that. It's a time traveling ball pit, which I don't think it's as a time travel ball pit as it seems. At least how it plays out in the story. I'm starting to think there might be more to it than just basic time travel. Um, if anything, it's actually more simple now that I think about it. I think it's not necessarily a time travel ball pit. It's more of a illusion. It's probably taking him to a place that really is like what it looked like back then, but I don't think he's actually physically going back in time. I think it's more of kind of a hallucination. I only think this because of other events that happen in the story um, that make me go, oh, wait, maybe this is like a head game kind of situation uh, where it's more of an illusion than actual time travel. I could be wrong, but that's what I think, and I'll kind of go into more detail closer to the spoiler section just in case. But basically, he goes into that's what happens when he goes into the ball pit, and he tends to go back in there a couple of times until it starts going very, very wrong very, very quickly. So that's as far as I'll say for right now on the story. And what I'll say is, it is the best introduction to the entire series. Like out of all the stories I've read so far, this is like, yes, this is the best first start of the series. Just like it's the perfect way to get you started. It's the best first story because I can't imagine starting out with any of the other stories in the series. This is definitely the best introduction to the whole thing. Um, the only thing I would say is that it's if you've never ever played a FNAF game, you can argue it's technically a pretty big spoiler. At least until you play up to I guess game um I think of the third game. By the third game, you would have to know at least information by the third game in order to read this without getting spoiled on anything of FNAF. Like if you went completely blind on this, never played a FNAF game, I would argue it technically spoils that aspect. But it could get you more interested in it, like, trying to, like, play the first few games and see the development of how you get that information in the first place. Because it kind of goes into, the big stuff when it comes to FNAF, like the main tragedy that happened. It starts this whole sequence of events, basically. If anything, it's basically a recap of that, in a sense that it just kind of gives you a glimpse of what happened. So when it comes to the pit, because I am, I'm not very good at when it comes to doing tier lists. I'm not that picky. I put it on S tier because not only is it a really good story, I like how it ends. I like how everything's structured and everything. I even like the pacing. Um, and just because of the placement alone, it is definitely written to be the very first story you read out of the Fazbear Frights. It's the perfect story to be the first one you read, uh, most likely because it's literally designed to be that way, but that's what makes it good. I like it, so it's on S tier. It's on S tier. Okay, the second story, To Be Beautiful. This one's surprisingly kind of short. But then again, I feel like that's kind of how it is with these stories, is that either the second story or the third story is usually the shortest. So now how this one goes is that there's the main character in that story is named Sarah, and she has a very negative opinion about herself, particularly on her appearance. She's very obsessed with being beautiful, which is kind of typical for, most teenagers. I think in the story she's pretty young teenager, very critical about her appearance, which is pretty typical, but I would agree that she does go to very extreme thoughts about changing her appearance. It is a very simple story about a girl struggling with her body image and basically finds the equivalent of, I guess, how I describe it, a monkey paws situation, because you can kind of tell pretty early on how bad, like, it's gonna go bad, but how bad is it gonna go? It definitely has a cautionary tale vibe to it, especially with its fairy tale like pacing, which could be a little repetitive in some parts, but as long as you have that kind of mindset going in, it makes sense. And like I said, I think it's technically a lot shorter than it feels because of its slight repetitiveness. But it's totally worth it when you get to the end. Like that, it, it the repetitiveness does fit with like the wall hit that happens where just like suddenly everything just goes woo. I'm trying it like I said, it's a short story. I'm trying not to spoil. I think they could have done a little bit more with her friend Abby, her character, but that could be because of the fact that they slip into Sarah's kind of new life that she's forming very quickly compared to staying with the mundane life that she had with Abby. I do like how Abby, well, without spoiling the ending, how Abby reacted near the end. That was a nice touch, despite, like, if you didn't feel like you got enough of Abby, at least that moment kind of, made sure that there was no bitterness towards the end, despite everything. Um, I guess I kind of want a little bit more of Abby just because of the fact it's obvious that her character was supposed to be literally the opposite mindset that Sarah had, and that's why the most of the conflict happened. And I feel like if they had more interaction with it, there'd be more of like an interesting topic about people that have these kind of struggles versus someone that just can't even fathom that kind of struggle to the point where it kind of comes across as frustrating when they see other people focus on stuff like that. And I did like the fact that instead of like making Sarah completely like your average like ugly girl turned beauty, disown old friends. In fact, it's kind of cute how she still considered Abby her friend, despite her forming this new life around her. She's just like, well, once I do all this, I'll make it up to her later. Like, she was so focused that this was still, like, she was still her best friend, despite them not talking to each other. I was surprisingly thought that was kind of cute, and it kind of helped me get through, like, her like she didn't ditch her friend. At least she didn't think she did. She doesn't have a mindset of she ditched her friend, even though she did, but she doesn't think of it that way, and she's not really good about not fixing that. Uh, Unlike other stories where like yeah, you totally ditched your friend and you're okay with it because I got a better life now kind of deal. I thought that was interesting how Sarah was naive about that, which I thought that was different. Now, where would I put this on the tier list? Surprisingly, I would strongly say this is a really good non-FNAF story, if that makes any sense. Like, it does have an animatronic, technically, more like a robot, but it's you. technically don't have to know anything about FNAF to like this story, this particular small story, which is weird because I think, I mean, I'm pretty far in the books right now, and I heard something along the lines that this story is connected to the main plot of the series. So I'm surprised how non-necessary, but also is necessary. It's very weird. It's weird. I don't know where to place it. I guess what I'm saying is that even though it's connected to a lot of the stuff that happens later on, by itself, it's a very good story, whether it's connected to the FNAF series or not. Um, I guess, at least for now, I might change my like. These are susceptible to change. These aren't permanent, but for now, I guess I would put it on A tier, only because of the. I think they did a good job with Abby. Like, technically, it's just enough for the story to work, but I think they could have done more. But I get why they didn't, because of how the story is paced, it wouldn't have worked. So, that's kind of where I am. But overall, it's really good. That's just like the tiniest little thing I could think of that made me go, like, could have done with more with that character. But other than that, everything else was structured really great. Especially if you're okay with, like I said, the fairy tale like pacing. So here we go once again, putting it on A tier. So right there. And the last one was Count the Ways. Now this is a very interesting one. Um, Only because of the fact that I actually like after I finished it, I realized I appreciated the story being told unchronologically. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Unchronologically. Um, Only because of the fact that I think even like them writing this particular story, they knew that this character would be a hard sell in the sense of like if we did the events in the order that they actually are, um, it, she would not be a fun character to hang around with. And then by the time she gets to uh, into Funtime Freddy and stuck in there and him counting the ways of how he's gonna kill her, um, it would have been um, it would be hard to like her or at least be concerned about her at the beginning, and then it just kind of be a bit of a drag during the. I mean, it would still be intense, but it would also be kind of a drag, if that makes any sense. Yep, I'm not. I'm not explaining this very well, am I? I think the parts with the main character is named Millie, and I think the best parts in the story were with her and her grandfather, which makes sense because it sounded like those were the two, like these are basically the two main characters outside of Funtime Freddy showing up. Um, and I like the interactions between the two only because of the fact that he really was like I wouldn't say he's her exact opposite, but I feel like he. I think there it was have how I looked at it is like it was heavily implied that Millie's grandfather was very much like her at one point, or at least had a very similar mindset when it became to being honest. Because that was mainly her biggest thing was her quote unquote being honest or being truthful about things to the point of being kind of a jerk. Uh, and he was a very honest character too, but of course he approached it differently. And I did like the fact that he didn't completely have her push him around either. Like the one point in the story where he got really mad at her and she had like a whoa, like a moment of just like, oh okay, like it's like don't push grandpa around. Like he's not gonna he's being nice to me. Let's just put it that way. I guess what I'm saying is I like these two characters only because of Millie and her grandfather is the fact that you could take it as in the grandfather's being the correct way to carry your honesty and hers is the uh, not the correct way to carry honesty, which makes sense because he's an older person most likely already past many of the mistakes that Millie has made as a teenager. So that's why I think that's why he was very patient with her, but also at the same time would not take it if she went too far. Um, which is really fun. I'm so glad. Uh, weird side tangent. I am so glad that Security Breach came out like around the time I started thinking about doing this, only because of the fact that I love the jokes that have been going around about how Count the Ways is just basically the anti-Gregory and Freddy, glam rock Freddy situation. Cause like, because it's basically that if it was just completely like wrong, like, it's just like it became not a fun time. Oh no, that's even a worse joke. No. It's even funnier if you think about the fact that both of these Freddys have the exact same voice actor, which that still kind of blows my mind a little bit, only because of the fact it's just like those are completely two different voices. Uh, anyway, that's a side tangent right there. Now, okay, so that's basically all I have to really say about this story, without getting into spoilers. So I'll just do this real quick. I would say I would put the Count the Ways into A tier, like right next to the second story, only because of the fact that uh, very smart on the writer's part to not make it chronologically in order. Only because if you weren't worried about her situation in between the events that were going on, I don't think people would stomach this character very much, which is kind of ironic considering the kind of ending the story had. So I will put this on A tier, right there. Okay, so I was thinking of kind of doing the second book, but now that I think about it, this video is already long enough as it is, and I'm starting to think that I might have to just do each book for each video. So, Into the Pit, good. I'm not going to do the epilogue only because of the fact I feel like that's going to be a whole completely separate video once we finish the series. Um, and like I said, it's a really good start. The Into the Pit is like the best start for this for these books. There's a lot of these books, so like this is the best start to go into. Um, I would say like once again, you kind of have to be a FNAF fan to really be enjoying these stories, but there's a little bit of in between here and there that you don't necessarily have to be a FNAF fan to enjoy these stories. It's just there might be like a slight disconnect with certain like things, like certain elements that make you go, I don't understand why that's a thing. It will, you might end up feeling that's weird. But with the tier list, that's the only way I can think of how to structure these videos. Uh, but I might change my mind on how to do this. But so far, tier list, probably the best way to go about this. Um, and the only reason why Into the Pit is the only one on S tier and the other two are in A tier is because S tier, like technically all tier lists are kind of biased, but S tier in particular, at least how I'm structuring this, is that S tier is 100% bias when it comes to my particular tastes in storytelling. Kind of like certain like story elements and stuff like that is completely biased towards me. Like when it comes to like certain fears, uh, I would say Into the Pit kind of goes into that fear aspect of things. Like Into the Pit goes like it does capture that childhood nightmares that I would have. Um, so that alone already makes me go, that is 100% bias. That is a particular fear. So that is why it's going on S tier. It would be on A tier if I kind of felt the same way with the other two stories, where it was more of it's really well structured. It was really good, but it doesn't hit all of my storytelling biases. Uh, so that's why I set it up like that. Another good example is that I am a sucker for father son relationships and storytelling, or brother and big brother relationship storytelling structures. another 100% bias. It's just basically there's a particular tropes that I really like, and there's no excuse to like this story because of that trope. You know what I mean? So that's why it's on S tier. And the other stories are in A tier, only because like that. Just don't think about S tier too much. That's 100% biases up there. Um, but yeah, and now we are going into spoiler territory. So from here on out, I'm going to be talking about certain details in all three stories. So if you are interested in these stories, I 100% recommend you turning off the video right now and going to check it out. Or if you've already read the story and you want to hear somebody else's opinion on it, then continue on ahead. Or you're one of those nerds like me that tend to watch videos that are about nerd stuff but are actually not invested into the particular medium or not just the medium, like the particular uh, fandom or whatever. You just want to hear a nerd talk about nerd things of something that you've never even watched or read. Uh, Welcome aboard, I guess, and we're going to continue on with the spoiler corner. This is the section that I'm calling it now, the spoiler corner. So, into the pit. This one's an interesting part that I wanted to talk about was the fact that everybody assumes, which it's all right to assume, I guess, the fact that the kid goes back in time. The kid goes back in time going through the ball pit. I personally don't think that's what's really happening. I did also hear that the the ball pit does get brought up later on in the series. So far, I'm like halfway through of all the books right now, and I still haven't came back to the ball pit or had any kind of time travel again since. So far, this is the only event that's happened. So I still think that the ball pit didn't actually send the kid back in time. I think the I think that was the rabbit using illusions. Probably into, like, I'm not saying that where he went didn't exist. I'm saying that he most likely made an illusion of that time period for the kid to run around in. And he wasn't actually sent back in time. Like, there's like nothing that he would have done there would have caused any butterfly effect. It was just all an illusion. Um, and I personally only think that only because the later on in the story, the the rabbit suit thing uh, did prove that it could cause illusions in the sense of like everybody when he takes the dad, right, pulls him into the ball pit, and then he kind of takes over as the dad, right, and that is 100% an illusion because the kid could see what he actually looks like, but everybody else just sees his dad. So that's why I was like, oh, so would that make the time travel aspect also an illusion? And in that case, I don't think he's actually going back in time. Another really cool key fact that made me go, yeah, it must be an illusion, is that in between him going back into the past, into the ball pit, there was this one point in the story where he goes to eat breakfast with his mom, and he just starts chowing down on the food. And at first, like the mother in that situation, she just thought he was just super excited. He feels better. But I started to think also, like, how, like, could it be that he didn't actually eat anything when he went there? Let's go back a little bit. It's the fact that when he went to the past, he would eat pizza with the two kids there. Um, but I started to think if it's all an illusion, he couldn't possibly have eaten that. He probably thought he did eat pizza, but I don't think he actually did. So like by the next day, he was starving. I think it's like something like that, where it's just like he's not actually eating anything. He thought he did, and then a few hours later he's starving. And there's even other parts too where it comes across that he's becoming more hungry. Every time he goes in between. So I'm just all like, okay, this might be a hint, like the subtlest hint that him going back in time is actually just an illusion. He's not actually going back in time. He's just, I guess, getting a visual event, a very detailed visual event of a past event. I mean, he is interacting with it because of the two kids, but like I said, I don't think anything that he's doing is causing any butterfly effect. Um, so let's talk about the. I'm kind of mixing the two last stories real quick because this is the only things I really want to talk about when it comes to Be Beautiful and Count the Ways. Because like I said, To Be Beautiful is kind of short, and I kind of basically said everything except for, of course, the end, which I tried my best, but it's very obvious by this point that she dies. Basically, when it comes to Sarah's character in the second story, her body parts get replaced by robot parts over time, and then she basically dies. It could like it's one of those things that's a little vague on like does she 100% die because this like if you know anything like if you didn't know anything about FNAF, you would just assume that she's just straight up died. But when it comes to FNAF, there's a strong possibility that she might have also like might have been trapped within the metal part. Like her soul might be trapped within the metal parts, but since it's all broken and scrapped, she might be paralyzed. So she might be like a paralyzed ghost inside. That could almost be worse. That's the thing. I was like, it's one of those things. Like she's either dead or worse. When it comes to Sarah, that's what's really, ooh, that's oof right there. Um, like because the main character in Into the Pit, uh, Oswald in the Into the Pit, he survives. Sarah dies or worse, and then you have Millie's story. Now Millie's story has a very vague, like super vague. People still don't even know is the fact that if she survived her story or not. It's kind of left to the audience to kind of decide as to like, do you think she survived or not? I'm in the camp of Millie survived, but at the same time, I totally where people are coming from, where the fact that they don't think she made it. But that is really cool just because, like I said, Into the Pit is like the best. Not only because, like, what I mean Into the Pit, I mean like the book in and of itself. The three stories. You have a one where there's a survivor, there's a like a victim, and then there's like an in between. And that's what I like about the structure of the entire first book is that because like you get this false sense of security after Oswald survives, right? You're like, well, this is a children's ghost story. Maybe they're not going to go that direction. Like we're gonna be spooky, but we're not gonna be like, oh, people die and stuff. And then the second story happens, and you're like, oh, people die and stuff. And then the second one's like, I think she's dead. So it's like it leaves room open, and it's very good in that sense of like because there's going to be a lot of stories after this where it kind of goes back and forth between like characters surviving or not surviving. I would argue that most people die. Uh, but then again, I haven't finished all the series, so I could be wrong. I could be starting hitting to like a bunch of survivors. Um, but yeah, like it's one of those things where it basically gives you the structure of a like yes, you're gonna have some survivors, and yes, you're gonna have some people that die or worse, and then you're gonna have the like really odd vague ending. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end it here, guys. So I was going to do my comments reading because I got a lot of comments in my last video. But I feel like I should answer those comments in my video coming after this one because it'll be more relevant to that one because it'll be the talking about Obey Me. So I will just leave the video here then and leave the comment reading to the next video. Uh, so thanks for everybody that did comment on my last video. I will definitely be reading them in the next one after this one. And hope you guys enjoyed this. And basically whatever comments are put on this video will be answered in the next video talking about fazbear frights. Hopefully everybody enjoys this. I would look forward to making another one if everybody's interested. And leave a comment below of how you feel about my opinions on this or anything that you probably think that you would like to bring up. And I think that's going to be it. So, thank you for listening to my... I think I'm going to call these videos uh, draw and rants or sketch and rants. Something like that. Something about ranting. I feel like this is a ranting thing. Anyway, talk to you guys later. See you in the next video. Good morning and good night.